Hello everybody, my name's Isaiah McCarthy, welcome to Headed Back Home. In this channel, I seek to offer encouragement to those who are disheartened or dissatisfied with themselves and the world around them by pointing them to what's true, good, and beautiful. In our last video, we discussed how, in a seemingly paradoxical way, how we actually find true life and true fulfillment is by taking the focus off of ourselves and directing it towards the service of others. However, at the end of that video, I also mentioned that I didn't want to sugarcoat what a life of service actually entails. Oftentimes, it can be very taxing, extremely difficult, and very overwhelming. And so in this video, I want to make sure we have realistic expectations as to what loving others actually looks like so that we don't become discouraged when we go out into the world trying to serve others and we face difficulties of all different kinds. And to create these realistic expectations, I need to say one thing very directly and bluntly. What I want to make clear is that most people's idea of what loving others looks like doesn't actually exist in reality. It's simply a fantasy that we infatuate ourselves with to avoid the work of actually loving others. And this difference between the idea of loving somebody and what a life of service actually looks like is beautifully captured in Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. In one of the earlier chapters of the book titled A Lady of Little Faith, this woman goes to a monastery to talk to a monk, and with this monk she discusses this struggle she has internally when she thinks about devoting her life to the service of others. And as she's venting to him, she asks of herself, "If the sick man whose sores you are cleansing does not respond immediately with gratitude, but on the contrary, begins tormenting you with his whims, not appreciating and not noticing your philanthropic ministry, if he begins to shout at you, to make rude demands, even to complain to some sort of his superiors, as often happens with people who are in pain, what then? Will you go on loving or not?" And imagine, I already resolved it with a shudder. If there's anything that would immediately cool my active love for mankind, that one thing is ingratitude. In short, I work for pay and demand my pay at once, that is, praise and a return of love for my love. Otherwise, I'm unable to love anyone. I mean, here we just see this illuminating confession that many of us most likely resonate with if we're honest with ourselves. Oftentimes, we think that we want to devote our lives to the good of loving others simply for the sake of love itself. But if we're honest with ourselves and reflect on our true motivations and intentions in doing so, it's because we want to be praised and loved in return. And the monk responds to this lady not by condemning her, but by affirming that this is a common human struggle. And the story he gives in response is fascinating and thought-provoking. Listen to this. "I heard exactly the same thing, a long time ago to be sure, from a doctor," the elder remarked. "He was then an old man and unquestionably intelligent. He spoke just as frankly as you, humorously, but with a sorrowful humor. 'I love mankind,' he said, 'but I'm amazed at myself. The more I love mankind in general, the less I love people in particular, that is, individually, as separate persons. In my dreams,' he said, 'I often went so far as to think passionately of serving mankind, and it may be, would really have gone to the cross for people if it were somehow suddenly necessary. And yet, I am incapable of living in the same room with anyone even for 2 days. This I know from experience. As soon as someone is there, close to me, his personality oppresses my self-esteem and restricts my freedom. In 24 hours, I can begin to hate even the best of men, one because he takes too long eating his dinner, another because he has a cold and keeps blowing his nose. I become the enemy of people the moment they touch me,' he said. On the other hand, it has always happened that the more I hate people individually, the more ardent becomes my love for humanity as a whole." I mean, Dostoevsky was a phenomenal writer. This passage perfectly encapsulates the distinction that I'm trying to make in this video. What both this doctor and the Lady of Little Faith were struggling with was that they realized their idea of loving others was vastly different than what it actually looks like to love others. We will constantly daydream about all the loving actions we're going to perform and how we're just going to empty ourselves in a life of service we deceive ourselves that we love humankind by forgetting that humankind is made up of individuals that we can't stand. If you conducted a survey around the world and asked, do you think it's important to love humankind? Or even asked, do you love humankind? If I had to guess, most people would say undoubtedly yes. However, if you then followed that person throughout their day-to-day life, I also wouldn't be surprised to see them gossiping about irritating coworkers behind their backs, or ignoring people holding up cardboard signs saying, I need help, or complaining about the simple inconveniences that come with day-to-day interactions with friends and family. I wouldn't be surprised to see them abuse people's trust by telling a small lie or flipping somebody off in traffic that cut them off. And I'm no better. I'm guilty of this too. I constantly look at the selfless life of Jesus, and I am captivated by its beauty. But my desire to follow in his footsteps does not align with my day-to-day actions. And so what can we do to keep from becoming these hypocrites who claim that everybody ought to love humankind while we fail to love humankind ourselves? This is a really tough question, but I think a good place to start is to read the advice that the monk gave to the lady of little faith. Hear this. He says, I am sorry that I cannot say anything more comforting, for active love is a harsh and fearful thing compared with the love in dreams. Love in dreams thirsts for immediate action, quickly performed, and with everyone watching. Indeed, it will go as far as even giving one's life, provided it does not take too long but is soon over, and everyone is looking on and praising. Whereas active love is labor and perseverance, and for some people, perhaps, a whole science. Now, if you ever find yourself around this book, I would highly recommend reading the rest of that chapter, because the monk continues on in his dialogue and offers this profound insight that it's actually in us trying to love our neighbors and failing that we're brought closer to God himself. I mean, it's crazy. What I want to point out is what I mentioned before reading it. What the monk doesn't do is try to alleviate the woman's concerns by telling her that if she just gives her life to others, everything will go smoothly, or that everything starts to become effortless. Rather, he claims that loving others can be downright horrific. It can cause little to no change. It can take years or even decades of your life. It will often go unnoticed, and you may not receive any thanks for it whatsoever. It takes effort. It takes diligence. It takes hard work. It's something you have to learn how to do well, because loving others doesn't come naturally or spontaneously to human beings. And if you're hearing this and asking, if loving others is so difficult, why on earth would I dedicate my life to it? It's because that in the labor of loving others, we find our true purpose. It is in the labor of love that our character is formed. And it is in the labor of love that we discover how much God loves us. My goal in this video is not to scare you away from a life of service. It's just to ground your expectations in reality so that when you encounter troubles on the road ahead, you don't become caught off guard and discouraged. A life of service will be difficult, but not as difficult as if you were expecting it to be easy. What I'm offering is kind of similar to like the Stoic practice of negative visualization, where you imagine misfortunes that could come about in your future because, like Seneca writes, he robs present ills of their power who has perceived them coming beforehand. Now, I'm personally not going to recommend that you should take time to sit down every morning and imagine bad things that could happen to you. But what I would recommend is that you have it ingrained in your mind, or almost have it as sort of a disposition, that things often don't go the way you desire they would. That in dedicating your life to the service of others, things are often just going to be unremarkably bland and tremendously unrewarding. And while at first these may seem like some harsh truths that we just want to avoid, in reality they're going to protect us from that idea or that dream of love that Dostoevsky's talking about. Because what you're going to learn is that a life dedicated to serving others doesn't mean that spectacular things are just occurring every day in your life. Sometimes they do, don't get me wrong, but oftentimes it rather looks like performing many, 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 unnoticeably small things consistently well. It means you're going to start straining to listen to somebody when they're talking about something you're not interested in and you are exhausted. It's going to mean going out of your way to offer your neighbor help with moving furniture on your day off. It's going to mean responding to others with humility and patience when you feel they've genuinely wronged you. It's going to mean making an effort to make sure someone feels included in a group that you don't particularly like. It's going to mean accepting that you are not the first priority in your life anymore. But, as I've been arguing for 3 videos now, it is through these sustained acts of love and service that we find our true joy and peace and fulfillment, etc. And I know this can be hard to wrap your mind around. How is completely emptying myself to the service of others going to leave me fulfilled and satisfied? But that's a great question we're going to save for the next video. In that video, I'm going to argue that it's through the emptying of ourselves that we come into a relationship with God, who is fulfillment, who is satisfaction, who is peace, who is joy. And if all this sounds too far-fetched to be true, I would just want to say, don't knock it till you try it. So I'll see you in the next one. But until then, I love you, I'm praying for you, and I hope to see you on the road back home. Bye, guys.
Hey, my time coming, but it not now. Had some Percocet, I'm holding that, I tossed out. I just took it up a level for the most high. Yeah, young player coming off a lockdown. Yeah, running from the demons, so I'm laced up. If he's sending down a miracle, I'll take one. I be having days I probably need to take 2. Yeah, God knows I be trying to